Welcome back to A Story to Tell on the campus of Dixie State University. Today we're talking to Dana Dickson. Dana, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to be here.
One other person I know named Dana, who's male, Dana Andrews.
That's who I was named after.
Was it really?
Yep.
He was a great movie star.
Well, you have to be a lot older than me to know that.
Well, I watched him in many movies. They were all black and white, but
yeah, it was back in the day for sure.
Tell me a little bit about yourself. Are you from Washington County?
So no, actually I kind of grew up a little bit on the East Coast, and for like till I was about a teenager, and then we moved to Minnesota. I was out there for about 8 years, and then I came here to go to school up at Weber, and met my wife there and decided to settle down in Salt Lake. Had all my two daughters, had them in Salt Lake, and pretty much lived in Salt Lake from, I think we bought our first house there in 1980, and we sold our last house there about 3 years ago. And then I kind of, at the time, my mom and dad lived down here, and my dad was struggling with some health issues, and so I kind of backed into a riff at L3 Communications so I could spend time taking care of my folks. So I came down here late 2014 to take care of my dad until he was gone. And then it took me a couple years to get my mom's estate and stuff squared away and downsize our house into a new house she's built up in Brio. And about 2 weeks ago, we sold her old house, and we kind of wrapped everything up, and we're just tying up the last loose end. So I'm bouncing back and forth between Southern Utah and Bountiful, where I'm staying with my oldest daughter, while I'm doing things with Chairman Evans in Salt Lake. So I've been doing politics for about 25 years. I actually got a newspaper article, I think from 1992, that's like I consider the beginning of my political world, moving away from engineering and getting a little bit more involved in politics. So
where was this?
It's when it's an event that happened that caused me to get involved in the community council where I lived up near Olympus Cove. So got involved in the community council, got elected there, fixed some problems we were having with some developers and some things that had gone wrong in the community, and then I ended up on a planning commission in the Salt Lake County area for 4 years, and after that I got involved in, well, actually in parallel with that I got involved with caucus convention system. Got my first thing as a county delegate, and then a state delegate, and then a precinct chair, and then a ledge chair, and a senate chair, and then a vice chair of Salt Lake County, and then ultimately.
You were the Salt Lake County vice chair?
Yeah.
When was that?
When Chairman Evans was the chair. I think it was somewhere around 2006 to 2008 or something like that. I'm not sure exactly, but so I've known Chairman Evans for probably 15 years. Yeah, we're good friends, and so I'm currently helping him up at the state party headquarters, kind of volunteering my time to, help him manage the headquarters and the people in it, like in the post-election world that we're in right now.
That's a volunteer, unpaid job?
Right. So it's fun. I mean, I like it. James is an awesome guy. It's fun to work with, very talented. Interesting. I mean, I get to do a lot of fun things with him. So my wife we're both parliamentarians, right? So we help him sometimes with conventions or meetings or events that he has where we're worried about rules and meetings and bylaws, things like that.
That can grab you.
Well, you want to make sure you're always following the rules. I mean, I have people that dislike me in politics as my political opponents, but in all the years we've been doing things, nobody ever complains about how we run elections. And right, I view elections as kind of the barometer of are you doing the right things for the right reasons? And so we make a point of always following the rules, because that way.
Run that by me one more time. Always following the rules?
Yeah, this is Robert's rules, right? This is the bylaws, things like that. And people aren't always happy about how things turn out for them in meetings, but we don't break the rules to accomplish our goals. I mean, you just have to. I try to encourage people to get more knowledgeable about some of these things, because when I walk into a meeting, I see completely different things than what other people do. And they are terribly at a disadvantage. I tell them this all the time. We just had an institute, the Utah State Association of Parliamentarians. We have an annual institute, and I sent it out to all my Facebook groups saying, hey, you guys need to be involved in this. How many political people showed up? None, right? So all I can do is offer it. It does help me a lot. It's good to know things, especially the bylaws. So anyway, that's kind of what I'm doing. I've been retired now for about 2.5 years, which basically means probably busier than I've ever been doing stuff for people.
They say retire and die, so you have to keep busy. Well, what did you do for your career?
So I started working at Spare Univac back in the late 70s, and ultimately it became a bunch of other companies and defense contractors. So I worked there for about 35 years and retired, so I have a pension from them that helps keep me going, and investments that, you know, pay my bills and stuff, and we paid a lot of things off. So I just was an engineer. I have an engineering degree from Weber State University, and I have an MBA from BYU. So I was in management for a while in the defense industry and engineering for a while, and got to work on some very cool programs, some of which I can't talk about till 2049.
Well, I'll call you then, we can have this discussion again.
Right. So yeah, it was pretty good. I mean, I don't have any, I needed about 2 or 3 more years really before I retired to accomplish all my financial goals, but I can make it. I mean, it was good to help my dad and my mom through that rough patch, and I'm the oldest of 4 sons, so it was really falling on me anyway to kind of, you know, take the time to help the family.
Your children, where are they?
So my oldest daughter lives up in Bountiful. Her husband.
You're living with her?
Well, I stay there. I mean, we have a cabin out by Manila, so we stay there, and then I stay here with my mom. You know, it just depends on
where you are at the time.
And how cold it is. Or how hot it is, right? So
well, now you're currently the acting executive director?
Yeah, that's kind of what we call what I do. I mean, I started helping James the 1st of August. I got done with some campaign work I was doing the end of June, and so pretty much had July off, and then Chairman Evans called me up and said, hey, why don't you come up and help, because, you know, that part of the election year, especially a presidential year, there's a lot going on. So I told him sure, I'd go help, and you know, I just kind of plugged myself in with the executive director at the time. So we were like co-executive director with me and Brian Smith. These are fairly young kids, so it was fun. I mean, we had.
Is he still there?
He's working up at the Senate now for Rick Cantrell. But you know, we keep in touch, and he moved up there just after the elections.
Was he a paid person?
Right, right.
And you're unpaid?
I'm a volunteer, yeah.
So you have the same job?
Well, he was there a lot more during the day than I am. I mean, because really the way I structured it is so that we have a full-time person who's an intern that is quite capable, and then we have a communications director that works half-time, and she's very capable. And so
what's her name?
Cindy Quintana. And so I have kind of structured the place so that we have, I mean, thank heavens for Google and all the common things you can do together. So we use that to kind of keep in touch, and with my smartphone, I don't really need to be there, you know, full time. I mean, I come in occasionally just to kind of make sure things are synced up and everybody's happy, but you know, not being paid gives me a lot more flexibility than if I was a full-time employee. So try and get there once a week, or like with the convention coming up, I'm going to be there full-time, you know, the month before the convention. So you
Tell
really
me
have
about
to.
the conventions.
Well, we got an organizing convention coming up on May 20th, and that's where we elect new officers, right? So, or re-elect the old officers, depending on who's running. I mean, right now, it's really, the deadline for filing for officer positions is next Wednesday at 5 o'clock. So if you're interested or anybody's interested in running as an officer of the Utah State Republican Party, that's your deadline. Plus we have opportunities for resolutions, bylaw changes, amendments is what we call them, and constitution amendments, and then vendors buy booths, and organizations that aren't necessarily vendors, like maybe the NRA, sometimes they buy booths there to kind of connect with the delegates. We have 4,000 delegates.
That's statewide.
That's statewide.
How are they allocated?
Well, so the way your delegates get allocated per county is statewide during the year of a presidential election, registered Republicans vote. And we don't know how they vote, but we do know per county how many votes go for the governor, the lieutenant governor, the treasurer, and the attorney general. Okay, so those are the four. And so your votes in your county get added up, and as a percentage of the giant bucket statewide, that's your Republican strength formula. And so that determines what percentage of the 4,000 delegates you get, right? So it only gets determined once every 4 years, and depending on, like, I'm sure Washington County's numbers are going to grow because they're growing so fast here, and so they would get more delegates. And if a county has either less people in it or becomes more liberal, right, or more moderate, they'll lose delegates. Salt Lake continues to lose delegates, right, as far as I can tell. So that's kind of how delegates are chosen. In the county conventions that are happening right now, the state central committee members get chosen, right? I mean, in Washington County, your convention's coming up here pretty quick.
Right, on the 22nd.
Yeah, and so you can sign up to run for the state central committee, which is 180 people. That is our deliberative assembly for the statewide Republican Party. They make the rules. Sometimes the rules have to be ratified by the delegates at convention, like if it's a constitutional change. But the state central committee can change the bylaws by themselves, and they can kind of help the officers decide what direction, like with the SB 54 activities, they make decisions, right? So these are important positions, and a lot of times people don't even know that you can run for these spots, and they are very important. They meet quarterly, and that's a good thing to get in if you want to really learn a lot about politics. You get to meet the governor and the senators and the attorney general and all these guys because they show up at some of our meetings.
Well, we have 6 at-large members of the State Central Committee, and then the chairman and vice chairman are automatically members. So
I like to say ex officio.
Yeah, that means by right.
Right.
You're a parliamentarian.
There you
ex
go.
officio, by right of their position.
Yeah, as a result
So
of
I know
their
a little
position.
bit about parliamentarian.
Good job.
Drives me nuts when I see some of these meetings conducted.
Tell me about it, yeah.
How can I join your group? So it's important to attend the county conventions.
County conventions, I think my feeling is that the whole caucus convention system's gotten a bad rap over the last 3 years because we've been in this battle with Count My Vote, trying to do workarounds to the caucus convention system, and Chairman Evans really, fighting with these guys, but it's at the request of the delegates at the state convention, at the state central committee too. So he's their representative, and he's fighting with the governor and some of the people that are Count My Vote, people that have other, the governor's in a tough spot because he's got the Count My Vote people here and the delegates here, so he really has an unenviable position. But, some of these people, like Kirk Jowers, they have been all in, and Gail Miller financing some of these Count My Vote activities. So now, with SB 54, we have multiple routes for candidates, right? And going to these county conventions is important because you make decisions in your county, right? Right now, the workarounds for the people that want to circumvent caucus convention system, counties can change their bylaws to say, we're going to support our convention winners in our primaries. And
Can they prevent the non-convention people from
they
saying
cannot.
I'm a Republican?
Nope, they can't.
There was some rumor that was...
No, you can't do that. The law is pretty clear on it. If I was a candidate with a lot of money, like let's say I wanted to run a statewide race against Senator Hatch, I would have to pay.
Are you announcing?
No, I'm not. So I would have to, and I didn't want to go through the caucus convention system, right? So I would have to get 28,000 signatures, and they're about $10 a piece if you pay somebody to do it. So there's $280,000, and ta-da, I'm in the primary. Now, what the state party could do, but doesn't have the rules in place to do it, was we could say, because at that point it effectively negates the value of having a caucus convention system, right? If everybody starts doing that. So the county parties should be doing this, and the state party should do it someday, is say, you know what, our time and value is important, and we put energy and money and resources into our candidates. So if somebody gets to the primary and it doesn't go through our caucus convention system, that's fine, but our winner that we have, we're going to support them in the primary with people and with money. And that would kind of negate the benefit of going, circumventing the caucus convention system. So I know Davis County has done that in their bylaws, and I think maybe Utah County is doing it. But otherwise, you're just wasting your county's time if you're having a convention and you got people flying around your caucus convention system. So it'll be interesting to see, what happens. I mean, it's kind of a challenge for some of these candidates. Last year was really tough, right? Because we didn't know what the legal settlement of the SB 54 fight was going to be. And so the 2018 is going to be the first election cycle where we really know what the rules are. And and we're going to see how many people decide, I'm just going to skip or put in some, gratuitous activity at the convention, but not really planning on winning. Just take some pictures and say you were there.
What's the status of the lawsuit?
Well, the state party said pretty much it's done fighting in terms of spending more money on it. There's some things that are already in the works. And so the state central committee got together and said, well, on February 4th, they said, we're done with the lawsuit. And then they met again a few weeks ago and said, well, we're not really done because we got some more information on this. And so now there's these other things that are going to happen that don't take any money, that may go in our favor. So we're going to sit back and wait to see what happens on that. So they're back in the lawsuit, but they're not supposed to spend any more money on them. That was the deal. So in the meantime, the state party is paying down its legal debts and gradually to the attorneys that helped us get where we are. I mean, we won some things. We got our closed primaries were ruled constitutional, so we have closed primaries. You cannot vote in a Republican primary unless you're a registered Republican. We would have lost that if we hadn't have fought anything on this. So, and plus, I think one of the things that we got out of this, I mean, going into the whole legal environment, we didn't know what counties could do, right? I mean, it was just this SB 54 thing's like 1,000 lines of code in the, up in the state legal environment there. And so now we do know based on what's happening and how we're learning. I mean, because even during some of the court hearings, the judges said things that were indications to us of, hey, we can do things. And so we've learned that counties can say, we're going to support our convention winners, right? And we're going to finance them. And we're going to make it so that our energy and time is important, and we're not wasting everybody's time that's a delegate. So it's still important to participate in your county convention, right? It's significant. So it's been an interesting experience. I mean, ultimately, because we went through this, I think, back in the 30s and the 40s, we got rid of the caucus convention system, and then 10 years later, they went back to it. So I'm hopeful that, 10 years from now, they look around and say, man, this SB 54 thing was not healthy for us,
Would it have made any difference if they'd have changed the level from 60% to 69% or something?
Yeah, I mean, so here's the problem that we didn't foresee, because I was on the state central committee for like a decade during that whole thing, and they were really raising or lowering our threshold because the Democrats were doing it. We didn't care about the Democrats, really. I mean, we should have just been, some of these things that we had it at 70, 75, 80% in years past, right? And
when I ran 100 years ago for state treasurer, it was 80%.
yeah, so we just kept ratcheting it down, and we should have just looked around and said, you know what, heck with what the Democrats are doing. We're not losing to them. Let's just be bigger than that, right? And instead of dropping it down to 60%, in the convention that we had, the Count My Vote said this would have stopped the initiative, right? They only wanted 66.
Right.
I mean, that would have been fine. But, you know, I
Would've
think
been fantastic.
it didn't get marketed very well, you know.
Who was the chairman then?
Chairman Wright was there, and, you know, he did a good job of trying to present it like at the convention, but I think it needed to be more of an educational process than that. You know, we had a few people that were like crazy against it, and you know how that goes in
I know.
politics.
I'm on the Central Committee.
Yeah, you can. I mean, because Chairman Wright at the time, he had a job, he was busy. You know, it's all volunteer. They're not getting paid anything, right? And so they're working as hard as they can on both activities. And I was helping him at the time because him and I are good friends. And really, we had like, you know, probably 10 or 20 people that just worked hard to get that to fail. And all you got to do is put enough doubt in people's mind, right? And it didn't do very well in convention, unfortunately. So it just was a timing thing, and because he was busy fighting the initiative, and then the delegates, you know, education process. It's hard. I mean, if you don't do the messaging just right at the right time for the right amount of time, it's hard to really sell a complex. That was a very complex issue. And it was easy to trivialize it, right? And say, well, if we do that, then these terrible things are going to happen. Well, yeah, but that's...
Would have been a lot better than it is now.
Oh, it would have been. And now I don't know. I got a feeling it wouldn't have changed. We just still end up with SB 54 or something. Because I can't imagine that just boosting that up, you know, 6 points would have made that much different.
Well, I think it would. What I heard, I think it would, but of course I don't know everything. But well, what else do you want to tell us about politics?
So I think that one of the most important things, because I'm not from Utah, even though I've been here, you know, since '76. I do have the other background behind me, and people, I think, because I get the phone calls, right? I mean, I get all the phone calls and all the emails that come through the website come to me. And so I talk to a lot of people, and I think that people are really busy in their lives, right? They have church obligations and job obligations and volunteer things, and this political volunteering has kind of, you know, taken a backseat. Plus the press has been fighting with the state party, and so I think it's kind of lost its luster. But I mean, people like to complain about, you know, Donald Trump or Orrin Hatch or any of this stuff. But you know what? If you're not actually doing something, like at your precinct level, like your county central committee meetings are really important. Your conventions are terribly important. At least get yourself involved in that and learn how things work. So, I mean, most people don't even know what precinct they're in, right? Most of them don't know who their representative is or state senator. So it's hard for me to talk to these people via email when they see TV, they read an article, and they go, man, I hate that. Well, what's the basis for that feeling?
Fake news.
Well, yeah, fake news. But you know what? It really is more important to understand what you're reading than to react to it, right, you know, emotionally. And so I try to engage some of these people that are sending email to the state party and complaining about things, and by saying, so why do you feel this way? And the purpose is to educate them that there's a lot of things going on. There's a ton of good people involved in politics. I mean, these guys are doing the right things for the right reasons, despite what you may read in the Salt Lake Tribune. I'm always impressed how much energy and time these guys put in. You know, our legislature's a volunteer legislature. They get paid per diems and stuff to try to cover their costs, but I guarantee you it's not even coming close. So Utah has this wonderful environment that just got a big chunk knocked out of it by Count My Vote. And it is really a grassroots kind of a thing. And a lot of the elected officials, they hate it because they got to sit in somebody's living room and they got to be accountable for what they're doing up at the legislature. And those people, I mean, I've been in meetings like in my living room, right? I've had the attorney general and the governor, and in years past, in my living room, Congress people talking to my neighbors about what they've been doing and what their plans are. You don't get that in a primary-only system. You don't. You just get somebody spending a ton of cash on newspapers and TV and radio, and they are never going to talk to you personally. So that's what we'll lose, right? And so we're gradually on the slippery slope now towards primaries only. That's what SB 54 did for us. I mean, it's there if anybody just wants to take advantage of primaries only. And we lose all of that interaction with just regular people that I think kind of moderates the behavior of people up at the legislature when they know that people are paying attention in their neighborhood or in their state representative district or in their county or whatever. The caucus convention system is not this boogeyman. I mean, I know Senator Bennett lost, but you know what? I was the vice chair of Salt Lake County then, and I contacted their campaign. Like every couple months, I contacted all of the campaigns that went through Salt Lake County and asked how they were doing periodically. Their plan was they were going to win it in the primary. That's not a great plan. And Olene Walker, she had the same kind of a deal, right? She had people that were detached from the caucus convention system. They were going to win it in the primary. Well, you got to win it through the convention in the caucus convention system, right? So it wasn't the caucus convention's fault that those people lost. It was their campaign people. So.
Well, thank you very much for being with us. We're out of time. I'm really glad that you agreed to come on the show.
Thank you.
I caught you halfway down here and you didn't have your good clothes on, but actually you got your best clothes on. I like to dress up like that.
Comfortable clothing.
My
yeah.
dress up is bib overalls. So.
Well, thanks for the invite. You know, I'm happy to share what I can and help people get involved in this process.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and I'm sure we'll run this as often as we can and help people understand what the situation is.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us again on A Story to Tell from the campus of Dixie State University. This is Lane Ronnow.